Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Theresa. This is Lost My Thread. I'm doing a Q&A video today because I recently hit 5,000 subscribers on my channel and it seemed like a good opportunity to do it. So I reached out to you guys, asked if you had any burning questions or things you wanted to know about me, and I'm excited to answer those for you today. So I want to start off by saying a big thank you to anyone who asked me a question. I got some questions here and over on Instagram. It definitely helps to have some good questions when you're doing a Q&A. I did do a Q&A series that was actually a couple of videos when I hit 1,000 subscribers. I will put a link to it up here, but also down in the description box down below. There wasn't really very much overlap of questions. So if you're getting into the Q&A zone after you see this video, there are more questions and more answers that you can check out. I'm going to start with a question that I feel like I got asked essentially 2 times. So one person was asking, what is your sewing schedule like? How many hours a day or night do you sew? And somebody else asked, I know that you sew, knit, craft, and bake. How do you decide what to do when? Or do you have a craft rotation system? So it's definitely not a system. I will say that most of the crafting that I do, certainly most of the sewing that I do, is either done early in the morning or on a day off. So I am someone who wakes up very early in the morning, and even on work days, I often wake up early enough to do some yoga and then do some kind of crafting. I usually will do sewing if I have a decent chunk of time to do it. So I am a midwife, if you don't know. I work 8 to 6, 4 days a week. So I get 3 days off a week. That extra day off a week isn't necessarily a full sewing day, but maybe I'll use like half of that day to do some sewing. But like I said, I usually, if I have a big bulk of time, will spend it doing sewing. But I do have other crafts and hobbies and things that I enjoy. I feel like knitting for me is something that I tend to do more just when I'm sitting around. So often when I'm sitting on the couch with my husband, whether we're just like hanging out and talking or watching something, he's playing a video game, that kind of thing, I can sit and knit at the same time. So that's usually when I tend to knit. I might also do any kind of hand sewing if I've got any hand sewing elements on my sewing projects, or I might sit and pin pieces together. I feel like if I'm really into a project and really excited about something that I'm working on, I will usually find basically any opportunity to just sneak in a little bit here and there. So occasionally I will sit with my husband when we're hanging out and I will do a little bit of pinning all the pieces together. Then when he's maybe, you know, gone to make some cup of tea or he's gone to take a shower or something, I might sneak in and just do a few seams all really quickly so that I'm just gradually making progress. But I feel like for me, what I enjoy the most with sewing is sitting down for like a good few hours and working on it. The other time I sew at the moment is I have recently started meeting up with a couple of friends and having sewing days together. So the 3 of us sit around and we work on our sewing projects, and we've been doing that about once a month. Won't necessarily be consistently like that, but I will say that is definitely half sewing, a lot more hanging out and talking and laughing and not paying as close attention to my sewing. So it's much less efficient, even though it's a full day. And every so often, if I have some time off, I will give myself like a full sewing day, and those are always really satisfying. But I would say it's usually kind of little and often, I guess, is the main answer. The second question I had is, do you plan your sewing time in advance or just go with the flow? And I think the answer is kind of a little bit of both. So if you watch my channel, you will see that I generally will make like sewing plans videos. And also those aren't necessarily all the things that I want to make. I might look at what challenges are going on, just see what's missing in my wardrobe and make some additional plans on top of that. So I will often try and cut a load of things out at once. I'm someone who generally finds the cutting process a bit tedious and awkward. And so I will usually cut out like 2 or 3 projects at a time if I can. And then that way, when I do have some sewing time, I can look at what I've already got cut out and see what do I fancy, like what do I feel like doing. Now, if I don't have anything cut out, then I probably have a little bit more just openness to figure out what projects I want to work on next. I used to be very much of the mindset of once I started a project, I needed to finish that project before I started something else. And I felt like that was actually keeping me from sewing at times when I had the opportunity to sew. And I feel like giving myself that space to actually say, no, I know I'm halfway through this dress, but I really feel like just making a quick t-shirt. I allow myself to do that and I enjoy the process more, but also then I am able to get more stuff done and actually spend more time sewing. So for me, that is generally my preference. Question number 3 is, what item are you most scared of sewing and why? And I kind of feel like I can't answer this question without basically saying not really anything. And I know that's a bit wishy-washy and not really the point of the question. I am somebody who in general is not really worried or intimidated by projects, and I'm really not worried about making mistakes. I know that a lot of times when I sew, things are not going to work out, and that can be a really basic, simple project or a really involved make. If you invest the time in a more involved project, it is a lot more disappointing if it doesn't work out. So if it's something really involved, I do tend to make a muslin or a test fit before I go into like the full proper garment. But one way or another, I will say that I am someone who tends to kind of just jump into things and just figure stuff out as I go. At the end of the day, like there's always more fabric. You only waste a bit of fabric, maybe some money, some of your time, and then you have learned something as well. So it's not like it's completely lost. So I don't generally shy away from projects for reasons of like being worried or scared of how they're going to go. But there is one thing I was trying to think about, like what they meant by this question, taking in the nature that it was intended. There is one thing that I feel like I would really quite like to sew that I haven't sewed, but I don't really know that I ever will, and I'm certainly not planning to do it anytime soon, and that is a backpack or a rucksack. So I am somebody who carries a backpack with me to work all the time. I carry all kinds of equipment in there, including some pretty doggone heavy equipment. I need it to be big, I need it to be practical, but the backpacks that I can find out there that I've looked for that are practical, that fit the purpose, are just not all that inspiring to look at. I feel like I have in my mind an idea of this really cool backpack that I could make in some really amazing fabric with a really beautiful print on it, with all the trims that would make me really happy. But the thing is, I need it to be super practical. When I see a lot of backpacks out there, I feel like they're more like a kind of weekend, throw something over your shoulder, throw some things in it, maybe to take out for a day. They're not necessarily what I need, which is like a good, proper, heavy duty kind of carrying pack for me for work. And I feel like if I were going to try and make something that was that practical, I don't even know how I would do it. So the backpack that I have, it's really big, but it has this nice like structured padding on the back, which goes against my back to give a bit of support there. There's a good thick padding along the straps, in addition to some like it's like a ribbon, I suppose, that goes along it to give it a little bit more structure and support. I don't know where I would get all these elements, and I would have to essentially like design my own or just copy a backpack that I already have. And even then, I don't know how long lasting that would be, just being made on my own home sewing machine. Probably fine, but I just feel like it's a little bit out of my depth, and a lot of it is just because I don't really know how I would do it. So in an ideal world, I would love to do that kind of project, but I just don't feel like I have the know-how or the equipment to be able to just kind of wing it. So maybe it's something I would do eventually, but is the one thing that I feel like would be cool to make, but I just don't really feel prepared to actually spend the time to research and to do right now. The fourth question is there anything you would like to purchase for your sewing room aside from new fabric? And I appreciate that they added that aside from new fabric, because I mean, that's pretty much an assumption, right? Like I could always have more fabric and I would always be happy to receive new fabric. I feel like I could answer this in a variety of ways, honestly. Like if money were no object, if space was limitless, if I could have anything I wanted in the world, it's probably a little bit different than what can I actually get realistically in my life. So I'm going to start with the one thing that I feel like genuinely would change my sewing experience the most, would be a cutting table. I'm someone who cuts on the floor, a lot of floor cutters out there. I know I'm not alone. It is the only way I have the space and I have the height. My sewing table that I have here that folds down, when I fold it up, it's even a worse height for me to try and cut at. It's not a good height, and it has like legs that extend, so I don't feel like it's very secure either, so it's a little bit wobbly, so I don't think it would be great even if I did rise it up a little bit. I do not have the space, like in any way, shape, or form, have space for a cutting table anywhere where I live. We are in a small space. I have a single wall essentially that I use as my sewing space in a shared room with other things in here, so I can't just take over and have whatever I want wherever I want. But if space were no issue, that honestly would be my number one. So if I moved into somewhere where I had a bigger sewing space, that would be the first thing that I would get. Having said that, that's not the case. Let's be a little bit more realistic. If it were just money, and money were no object, I would get an air threading serger, no questions asked, immediately. I do like my sewing machines, and I really do like my serger in general. It does what I need it to. But I have thought before about like, if I wanted to upgrade my machines, how would I upgrade? If I could, you know, I won the lottery and I could get whatever I wanted. I don't even know if I would replace my little Janome sewing machine. I really like this sewing machine, and it really just does the stuff. My serger, as much as I like it, it's a very low-end serger, and more importantly, threading it is a pain. Like, it's fine. Usually I just tie a knot and it pulls the serger thread through, and it usually works out okay, but an air threading serger, like that's the dream. And then coming back to the real world, like the money I have, the space that I have, something that I would want. I mean, I do often just buy little things for my sewing if I feel like I just need this little gadget. Things are not usually that expensive in the sewing world. But one thing that I would really like, and I currently have on my wish list because my birthday's coming up soon, I would really like a little mini iron. And then either like a little mini ironing board, or you can get just these pads that you can iron on top of. And I feel like that would just be really helpful when I'm sewing, to just be able to press little seams here and there, or just press a pocket flat here and there, and not have to pull out the whole ironing board. So if I'm lucky, if I'm good, I might get it for my birthday. But that is the one sort of smaller, more practical thing that I would like that is realistic for me to get in my sewing space. But other than that, I feel pretty happy with what I have. Question number 5 is one that I knew would come up because I definitely get asked this one a lot, and actually a couple of people asked essentially the same question. One person asked, how did you end up living in England? Is your husband English or from the US too? And then somebody else asked, how did you end up in the UK? Midwifery or love? So first of all, definitely not midwifery. I didn't even really particularly know midwifery was a thing until I was studying nursing here in the UK and then fell in love with it. But no, the reason I came here is because of my husband. So my husband is from the UK. We met actually online when I was living in Chicago when I was 19. We started talking on a band message board. It was a Smashing Pumpkins alternative rock band. We were chatting on the message board, got along really well, decided to exchange emails, then ended up talking on Instant Messenger and on the phone a lot before we basically spent time going back and forth before deciding we needed to be in the same place. And so I moved here when I was 21 to the UK. Haven't looked back. There was definitely a lot of questions from people in my life. Was I too young to be making these decisions, to be getting married, moving to another country? 20 years later, I honestly feel like it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. I still love him so much, and I would absolutely do it all over again. So definitely follow your heart, guys. Sometimes it might lead you astray, but when you know, and we knew, and we definitely knew we needed to be together, and I am definitely happy to be here in the UK with him, or anywhere, to be completely honest. I also had a couple of questions about my husband, which I thought was really cute. I do probably talk about him a fair bit because he's an important person in my life and he's really supportive. And so he does come up probably in my videos from time to time. Number 6 was, you mentioned that your husband does the music on your videos. I'd love to hear more about that. Now, I have definitely mentioned it on my channel before. My husband is a musician, and so any of the music that's been on my channel, whether it's like my intro music, background music, my late night thread music, the Christmas music on my Vlogmas videos, all of those were written and recorded by him. And I feel really lucky to be able to have somebody just make bespoke music for me, and I don't even have to pay him for it. So it's definitely something I am grateful for. He also, you know, asked my opinion on things. He's written things that he thought I would like were my kind of style, which is really nice when you know somebody and then they can make something bespoke for you. Similar to like I've made him clothes, right? So it's a fair trade-off. I make him things, he makes me things. But yeah, I really do love all the music he's made for my channel. And I also really like, because the intro theme has been on my channel from the very beginning, he often will take my little intro theme and insert it into other music. So you may or may not have heard it, but on some of my Christmas Vlogmas music, my little intro theme might come in for sections of it. For my Clash of the Patterns video, that's like a heavy metal version of my intro video. He's also done like alternate versions of the intro music that I've used for other things within the channel. And it's just kind of a cool bonus, really. I mean, he is a musician in his own right, and he has recently actually recorded and released an album of instrumental music. So if you are interested in checking out any more of his music, I will put a picture of the album cover and links down below. His name is Boxall, and the album is called Linguicide. It is Linguicide because it's just instrumental, and you can get it on Spotify, Tidal, iTunes, like basically anywhere that you can get music. I'm biased. I think it's awesome. It's a whole range of different kinds of instrumental music, largely guitar based because that is his main instrument, but it's seriously cool. Check it out. Let me know if you like it. Share it with your friends if you guys like it. And that's enough plugging of my husband's album, but I had to mention it. Like it came up naturally. And number 7 is, why has your hubby opted to avoid the camera lately? He's a fun guy. Now, I love my husband. I think he's awesome, but he's not someone who loves being in front of the camera. I'm very used to being in front of the camera and I don't mind, but I appreciate that not everyone else is going to be the same. He's never been someone who liked to have his pictures taken. He doesn't like to be filmed, so I'm not going to pressure him into doing that if he doesn't want to do it. So basically that's the short answer. Because he doesn't want to. And at the end of the day also, it's my channel about me, and I feel like really it makes the most sense to be having me anyway. If he ever sneaks in here and there in the background, I'm always happy to have him, but I would never want him to feel pressured to be in my videos. It's my YouTube channel. Question number 8 is, do you have any tips for making YouTube videos, particularly editing tips? Now, I will say that I did actually talk about this quite a bit when I've done my 1-year and 2-year YouTube anniversary videos. I talked about what I had learned over the previous year, including things with like editing and video making. I will put links up here to those videos and down in the description box if you guys want to check those out as well. They're probably a little bit more specific, but I feel like if I'm going to give just like general advice, first thing I would say is that editing, like anything else, the more you do it, the easier it gets. The more you get into a flow, the more you figure out ways for you to do it easily. You get more accustomed to programs. Whenever you're using new software that you're not familiar with, it takes a little while to figure it out. And honestly, I think playing around with any kind of computer software is usually the easiest way to learn and get used to it. I would also say that you don't have to necessarily have really expensive software. There is a free video editing software that I used to use called DaVinci Resolve, and I used that for years. I only recently upgraded to Adobe Premiere Pro, and that one is like a subscription service, and that's just because I was having issues with the program being slow and things were really buggy on my old computer, so I think it may have actually been the old computer, but regardless. I will say DaVinci Resolve is honestly really a very good program, but it does a lot more than you probably need for YouTube. So it can seem like a lot when you open it up and you try to play around with it, but it does create really good high quality videos, and you can really do pretty much anything you'd want to do on YouTube within that program, and it's free. The other thing that's great about that program, I will say, is there are tons of tutorials about how to use that program. If you want to look up specific things, you can find them on YouTube as well. Same with Premiere Pro. I will say the better editing softwares, they are generally going to have more of like tutorials and walkthroughs on YouTube. You can also just look at like videos of how to edit a video on YouTube. Search for that. You will find lots of useful stuff as well, because the people who are making videos on YouTube know how to make a video for YouTube, so they are the best people to ask, basically. The other thing I will say is like you find a little rhythm for yourself, and there are some small bits that I can mention that I feel like have been helpful for me just to make my editing a little bit more slick. Now, I always try to have like long extended periods of time where I'm talking to have as few editing points as possible, but there do need to be editing points really if you're going to have a good video. I have found that if I can just start over from a section, if I know that I didn't really say what I wanted to say or stumbled over my words, I can just redo that section, and then when I'm watching my editing video, I can see where the little waveforms of me talking again start to pick, okay, this is the start of the clip that actually finished the completed thought, and then the other ones before were ones that I kind of stopped halfway through, so I don't even have to watch through those. But then also when I'm piecing those together, I feel like the spaces between edits can really make a difference of something seeming slick or seeming awkward. So I just honestly will go through again and again the transition from one clip to another over and over until it looks like it's kind of a continuous conversation. The other thing I found is that if I do actually have a little zoom in and out for each of my edit points, the edit points are a lot less obvious and a lot less visible. it seems almost just like a more natural, like almost like a slightly different camera angle or something. So that's something that I've started to do recently that I feel like makes my edits a little bit less obvious. But I feel like the gaps in the timing between the edits, it's a bit of a feel thing. And I think if you just watch them over and over, you will start to get a feel for what works and what is a little bit more awkward. I will also say that once you start editing, it is actually really useful to then go and watch YouTube videos and see what are they doing that you're not doing. You might be able to pick up on things that you like and don't like about other people's channels. Once you are editing yourself, you will probably see other YouTube videos completely differently. I do feel like the best editing is basically invisible. You don't really notice those edit points. The ones you tend to notice are usually a lot more jarring or awkward, really odd pauses. So I will say the more you can see what other people do, you can then take what you like, leave what you don't, and try to improve on your own channel. Similarly, especially once you've got videos up on YouTube, I think it's really important to actually compare your videos to others, looking to see like, are they a similar volume? Are they a similar volume to the ads? Do you notice that suddenly your videos look much darker compared to the brighter lit videos that other people are making? Is your image quality really poor? Again, maybe down to bad lighting. You don't necessarily need to invest in loads of stuff, but see what you can do with what you've got to make it as high quality as you can, because that could be the difference between people wanting to watch your videos or not. And my final question, number 9, is one that I feel like I could honestly do probably a whole video on, and I may well do at some point. It's such a good question. I'd love to hear about what sewing gives you mentally, emotionally, anything apart from the finished product, obviously. I love how sewing makes me feel about what I can accomplish myself, and I would love to hear your take on that. So yeah, I feel like this is like, oh my gosh, my brain is like spinning so many things, all the things that I love about sewing. So yeah, the finished product, I would say in and of itself, is kind of like the least important element for me. I will say when I wear clothes that I've made, I do feel almost like a kind of suit of armor. Like I feel more confident, I feel more like myself, and I feel really good. In addition to the fact that I like the fabric, so it makes me happy, and I like the colors, and I feel like I've made a style or a shape that I like on me, so I feel confident in that way. But just knowing that I made it gives me a little bit of an extra level of just feeling good and feeling confident. Whenever I've worn clothes that I've made to say like a job interview, I've always felt way better going into it, feeling like, well, whatever else happens, whether I get this job or I didn't, I made this dress. I'm not too bad. Like I can feel pretty good about myself one way or another. And I feel like that confidence comes across for that kind of a situation or when you're meeting people. But yeah, I mean, honestly, that's still like, that's fairly down compared to some of the other things that I get out of sewing. I will say for me, it's a creative outlet. I get a lot out of the dreaming up the creative projects, of thinking how to make things my own. It's really enjoyable to work with my hands. I'm someone who has always really enjoyed working with my hands. So creating something with my hands is really satisfying. Feeling the fabric as it goes through the machine, feeling the fabric as I'm pinning pieces together, trimming seams, all of that like tactile stuff I really enjoy. But I feel like the biggest thing for me is like the kind of I want to call it the Zen state, the flow state that I get into when I'm sewing. I have a stressful job. Life can be stressful for all of us at various times in our lives. Sewing for me is like it's my best de-stressor. It's my thing that I do that really just calms me. Even if I have funny moments with a project that's a little bit awkward or I make mistakes, still it is overpowered by the good feelings that I get just mentally and emotionally from sewing. So I know that if I'm having a bad time, having a bad day, if I'm feeling stressed, and I can even spend half an hour doing a sewing project, it really grounds me and it really helps me to just clear my mind of all the clutter, because I'm focused on the project and I'm focused so on the project. You know, I definitely am someone who, if I'm sewing and I'm really into it, I can very easily forget to eat, drink, go to the bathroom. You know, I get into that flow state where I'm just working on the thing. It is something that is known to be good for your mental health, to have things that you're just doing almost mindlessly, that you're not having to spend too much mental energy on. And that is very much something that sewing does for me. I made a whole video about improving like mindful elements or incorporating mindfulness into your sewing. I'll put a link to that if you guys didn't see that up here and down in the description box. I don't necessarily do all those things all the time, but I do think I tap into elements of that whenever I'm sewing. And so for me, it's just really calming. But it also, I feel like it's something that I've done for so long. So I learned to sew when I was 16 years old, and I've been sewing since then. I'm now 40, nearly 41. And all this time I've been sewing, and it's been something that I've always done for me, largely by myself, until I started YouTube and kind of met more of the sewing community. And there have been stages of my life where I couldn't sew. I had major problems with one of my shoulders from like a repetitive strain injury, probably related to work. And I had about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, where I couldn't sew because I could barely lift my arm above, well, I couldn't even lift up straight ahead. Like lifting my arm up to move a mouse became excruciatingly painful. A computer mouse, if you didn't know what I meant. And so I had a long period where I couldn't sew, and I was also just struggling with pain. I was struggling with my mental health because of the pain. And once I got to the point where I was able to sew again, there was the fact that I was, you know, able to do all the things I just mentioned, work with my hands, have like the tactile feeling of the fabric, get into that Zen state. But it also just felt like I was being me again. I was doing the thing, one of the things that makes me me. I feel like sewing is such an important part of my identity. And I felt like I was my old self again in a way that I hadn't been for a long time. It changes my moods. I'm honestly a happier person when I'm sewing. If I'm not, I can be just a little bit more of almost like a robot. And I feel like it's just so important to do the things that bring us joy. And it's so easy to get swept up in the things that you have to do, that are all around you, that people want you to do, that you feel pressured from yourself to do. But if you take some time away to do something just for you, I think there's something really big that you can get even just from that in and of itself. So that's probably like the biggest thing. And you know, all the things everyone talks about, right? Self-expression, dressing how I want, presenting myself how I want to be seen in the world is really satisfying. Making clothes that fit me and they fit me how I want them to fit, and nobody else in the world has this exact same garment because I made it exactly how I want it. Honestly, I feel like there's just so much to say on this topic, but I feel like that's enough of a little dip into the things that sewing bring to me. I will say, of all the questions that people have asked me, this is the one that I would love to hear what you guys would say to this. What does sewing bring you apart from the clothes that you get on the other end? And honestly, the clothes on the other end, that's part of it as well. So if that's the biggest thing that it brings you, tell me about that too. But I would love to hear all of the other ways that sewing enriches your life, because I know I'm not alone, that it's really not about the finished product for me. It is so much more about the process and what it brings me as a person. And I love hearing how other people find their sewing helps their lives, enriches their lives. And yes, I really do want to know. Tell me in the comments down below. I always love watching a Q&A and just getting to know my favorite YouTubers a little bit more. I hope it was fun for you guys to hear a bit more about me. Thanks again to everyone who gave me a question. I think it was such a great range of questions. I think it was a fun Q&A to do. Please do give me a like if you enjoyed my video. Leave me a comment down below on any of the questions or any thoughts on any of the answers that I had for you guys today. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel if you're not subscribed already, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!